The International Relations Department says the United States isn't on a hunt for a new host for the upcoming AGOA forum to be held later this year, despite a push by a group of legislators in Washington over Pretoria's non-aligned position on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, otherwise phrased as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Deputy or Department spokesperson Clayton Monyela has in a tweet said they're noting a letter pushing U.S. President Joe Biden's administration to punish South Africa. He says no such decision has been submitted at this stage. South Africa exports about 60 billion rand worth of goods to the U.S. through the AGOA arrangement. This was just last year. The act provides preferential duty-free access to the American market for close to 40 African countries. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola is considering making legislative changes so that Russia's President Vladimir Putin's possible visit to South Africa during the Brics summit becomes a non-issue. This after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin for alleged war crimes committed in Ukraine. South Africa is obliged to effect an arrest as a signatory under the Rome Statute if Putin lands here. For more on this, let's talk to international law expert Advocate Ben Winks. A very good evening to you, Advocate. Good to have you with us tonight. In fact, if you could just clarify this phrasing I've seen today, domesticating the Rome Statute, what does that even mean and what would it entail? Advocate Winks, are you able to hear me? Let's give it a moment and see if we're able to figure it out. Fantastic. Now that I can hear you, I was asking what domesticating the Rome Statute would mean and what it would entail.
Yeah, it's very peculiar language that the ministers used because the Rome Statute itself as a whole is already domesticated. What the minister is talking about is domesticating a particular carve-out from the Rome Statute, where there's a possibility that a state party can introduce an exception to the principle that immunity doesn't apply, that a head of state immunity doesn't apply. Now, what the department is trying to bring into effect is a situation where if the head of state of a non-member of the ICC, and Russia is not a member of the ICC, just like Sudan was also not a member of the ICC, when President Omar al-Bashir came to South Africa, then you have to recognize that head of state's immunity. Now, it wouldn't have helped in the Bashir case because the Security Council was the one that requested the arrest warrant to be issued or directed the arrest warrant to be issued. And a Security Council resolution prevails over everything, all other customary international law. Now, what would happen in this case is that then you would need a Security Council warrant to arrest a head of state of a non-member of the ICC. Now, that would never happen in the case of Russia because the way the Security Council of the UN works is there are 5 members who have a veto over all decisions. Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States, France, and China. So the result is that those countries, you could never have an arrest warrant for a head of state of any of those countries that will be, enforceable, for example, in South Africa against a head of state who has immunity. So that's the situation that they're trying to bring about, but I don't think there's enough time, frankly, for them to do it before the Brics summit, because changing the act requires an extensive public participation process, which would take months.
So what are the other options then? If this is not workable, what can South Africa do to allow Putin to be able to attend, if he chooses to do so, in person?
Well, there's nothing they can do really, and that was that's the result of the judgments in the Bashir case and also in the case about withdrawing from the ICC, is that only Parliament can change the rules. The executive can't change the rules, and Parliament can only change the rules by amending the act, and that requires tabling an amendment bill, having consultations in a full public participation process in the National Assembly, in the National Council of Provinces. It gets sent to the President for his signature. If he has reservations about the constitutionality, then he can send it back to Parliament. And of course, there can be a constitutional challenge. So it's not a quick thing just to amend a piece of legislation. They wouldn't be able to do it in time.
So legally, aside of the court pronouncing or confirming that the country is indeed obliged to, as a member or signatory to the Rome Statute, effect an arrest and hand Putin over to the ICC, and what would be global condemnation from the West, especially on this issue if Putin came to South Africa and wasn't detained. What else would be the risk legally for South Africa? What's the worst that could happen?
Well, South Africa could be penalized by the ICC and possibly expelled from the International Criminal Court. And it may well be that as a matter of realpolitik, that South Africa would rather face an expulsion from the ICC than potential sanctions from Russia, which could have, potential even military sanctions from Russia, which could have devastating consequences. So they may very well decide to do something that's illegal under the ICC statute and face the consequences under the ICC statute, rather than incur the wrath of a powerful military superpower.
But it's also, I suppose, a balance between, or trying to find a balance between, A, not offending a quote-unquote friendly country and partner, such as Russia, especially under the Brics umbrella, but also the sensitivities among or between the South African relationship and the Western relationship, because there is also a great deal of trade that happens there, just between South Africa and America alone.
Yeah, well, the USA doesn't really have any moral high ground over South Africa as far as the ICC is concerned, because the US is not a member of the ICC, and the US has even, taken legislative steps to undermine the ICC in as far as arrest warrants may be issued against Americans. So they diplomatically couldn't really complain if we failed to arrest Putin. They have no
no moral leg to stand on
as far as the ICC is concerned.
Right.
So the aside from the ICC issue, they can have their diplomatic stance, but they can't criticize South Africa for failing to adhere to the ICC treaty because they're not a member.
Thank you very much for that, Advocate Ben Winks. Good to speak to you.